I would like to introduce Clare Sauro. And Clare, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your last name. Clare joins us from Drexel University, who is the director of the Robert and Penny Fox Historic Costume Collection. She joined Drexel in 2008 and has over 20 years of experience working in historic costume and museums. Heralded as a world-class collection of fashion and textiles by the Wall Street Journal, things I learn every day. Um, it is a museum quality collection of more than 20,000 garments, textiles, and related materials. As the director, she has mounted several notable exhibitions, including Brave New World Fashion and Freedom, Immortal Beauty, highlights from the Robert and Penny Fox Historic Costume Collection, Philadelphia in Style, a Century of Fashion from the Robert and Penny Fox Historic Costume Collection. That's a long title. And the James Michener Museum of Art, James Galanos Design Integrity. Her most recent exhibition is Venus and Diana, Fashioning the Jazz Age. In addition to her role as the director of the collection, she teaches courses in the history of fashion, and her current research includes fashion from 1910 to 39, Philadelphia retailer Nan Duskin, cellophane textiles, and Hollywood costume designer Bernard Newman. She's a frequent lecturer on history of fashion and is regularly interviewed and consulted by journalists and scholars on topics ranging from from red carpet fashion to the history of pajamas. Oh, and we're all in pajamas because we're all on Zoom. So what better way to open this? And Clare, I'm super excited to have you here. And full disclosure, Clare and I are collaborating on a research project at this moment. So this is an opportunity where I get to know a collaborator more deeply. And I'm so glad that you agreed to join us tonight, Clare. So can't wait to learn more about the collection. What do you have to say?
Oh boy. Well, first I want to say thank you. Thank you for inviting me. This is a great opportunity for me to share the Drexel collection with, well, the members of CSA and anybody else who wanted to join us tonight. I'm not great at promotion, so this is a really good thing for me to do. So, and I do much better with pictures. So I'm just gonna go ahead and share my screen and get the ball rolling, if that's okay.
Let's do it because I cannot wait to see these things, and I know that I will have a dozen questions at least.
That sounds like fun for me. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I am Clare Sauro. It's Sauro, technically, with a little trill to the R if I was properly Italian, but I'm not. So it's Sauro in the United States. It is the Robert and Penny Fox Historic Costume Collection. Prior to 2014, we were the Drexel Historic Costume Collection, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. And we are housed at the in the Antoinette Westfall College of Media Arts and Design at Drexel University. And yes, indeed, that is a very, very long title on all of those things. So who am I? Thank you, Leon Lanzarotti. Introduced me somewhat. That's a rather old picture, but this is me, Clare Sauro. I am both the director of the historic costume collection, but I'm also an assistant professor, and I teach costume history classes at Drexel as well. But my heart really is in the collection with the objects, and sharing this collection with the students of Drexel. We think we have about 20,000 garments, and 20,000 is a big number, but we have literally hundreds of illustrations and photographs and all sorts of things, a little bit of everything related to the fashion industry. It is primarily a fashion centric collection, and I will explain that in a little bit. But we are very much a teaching collection. Our mission is to educate and inspire and preserve these garments for the future, and exhibit them as much as possible to share them with the public as well. Oh, before I go any further, I want to say we are a very small collection. I'm very grateful for my team. You may notice that I think we have really gorgeous photographs, and that is because we are a team of three. It's myself and Monica Stevens Smith, who is our collections manager. And we all wear many hats. So Monica, sometimes she'll curate an exhibition, sometimes she'll teach a class. Well, she actually teaches classes regularly. And our archivist is Michael Shepard, who before he joined us in history, he was a professional photographer. So he takes all of our beautiful installation shots and press images, and I'm so grateful for them. I think they're exceptional. But anyway, so that's when I say we, it's primarily the three of us plus whatever students, interns, associated people that come in and out. But the three of us are really the core that make the collection run. So we have a fairly diverse collection. We have some particular strengths. We have a group of 16th and 17th century velvets, which are surprisingly beautiful. And
Wow.
I'll tell you about them in a little bit. We have a really great collection of Parisian couture from the very early 20th century. I'll go back to that in a little bit as well. We have a lot of international high style garments from the 60s on. What I found really fascinating and fun and just exciting when I arrived here from New York, we have a lot of objects with regional provenance, so very Philadelphia specific dressmakers and retailers. And that is one of those areas in the collection that I find fascinating because that very local context is you're not going to get that anywhere else. So that was really something that I had fun diving into when I first got here. And as I said, it's very much a research collection. Now that we've opened up a bit, this is a photograph from 2 years ago. So we support a number of different programs in the collection. Primarily, our bread and butter, of course, is fashion design and design and merchandising. But of course, art history, design history comes through, graphic design, arts administration and museum leadership, and of course, library science. In information science programs. Since I arrived at Drexel, one of my goals has been to try to get a more diverse a more diverse faculty and student use of the collection. So I do go out of my way to try to recruit, let's say, the history students to come work in the collection, or like I have a physics major who is doing a project, and she's very interested in dyes and light and how you can read dyes in fabric with light. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. I don't quite understand it, but I'm really glad that a physics student wants to come in and use the collection as a resource.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, bring them in.
Yes. So how did we get this huge collection is probably what you're asking or wondering. And I don't know for sure, but I believe we are at least one of the oldest university costume collections in the country. We date back to the founding of what was then the Drexel Institute, 1891, and this was the Drexel Institute of Art, Science, and Industry. And the founder, A.J. Drexel, he actually donated $1 million specifically for the purchase of art for a museum for the students. And his definition of art included textiles, which was pretty open-minded for him at the time, or for people at the time.
Wow.
So this is how we came to acquire 16th and early 17th century textiles, because $1 million in 1891 is like $27 million today. So there was a lot of money to go shopping with. And they bought really beautiful things. This is something that I had no idea existed when I came to Drexel. This was something that came to me when we were moving into a new location. And they're like, oh, we have these boxes. Maybe you should look and see what's in there. And I nearly screamed. So at this time, they bought 16th and 17th century textiles. They also bought arts and crafts textiles. So the one on the right is a James Wardle printed
Wow.
velveteen, and of course the one on the left is I think everyone will recognize that as a William Morris. And what's really wonderful about the Morris is it was bought directly from Morris and Company, and you can see the block printing information about the purchase at the bottom. There's it's never been used. It's never been cut into a curtain. So it's just a really exciting thing to have. And of those 16th and 17th century textiles, we probably have about 20 of those and about a dozen or so arts and crafts textiles. But we're primarily a fashion collection, and this started just a few years later, around 1898 or so. They decided that they needed fashionable dress and accessories to aid the education of what were then the dressmaking and millinery students. So this is a archival image from the Drexel archives of a dressmaking and millinery class. Or I think it's millinery class. Yes, it is. So at this time, the Drexel family then the Drexels were very well connected in Philadelphia. So they reached out to their circle of friends and said, "Do you have things that you donate to our students so they could study?" So we got some really amazing things from Philadelphia's social elite. So, for example, this is a really beautiful Worth mantle from about 1883. The textile it's a very deep kind of plum velvet with on a cream ground, and then it has this beautiful beading over it. I won't describe everything. A gown from a French dressmaker named Melanie Pascot from 1878 or so. This has an alternate bodice as well. And one of my favorite things is this La Esmerelda parasol. But the parasol is not so exciting. It has a Fabergé handle. Um, and when I discovered what this was, I was just so blown away by the beauty of this little. It's got real violets under rock crystal, and then it's studded with diamonds and has enamel on the handle. I had
I'm sorry,
a
Claire, those are
specialist.
real violets underneath that?
Yes,
Oh my
I had a specialist come in from Christie's, and she was a specialist in Fabergé, and she was so excited when she saw this because she told me that in the collector's market, because the parasols get tattered. And this one is in no great shape because the silk is all shattered. Um, they get removed. So the handles come up for auction, but the fact that we have the parasol intact in its original box with the handle attached, she said it was just extraordinary. And she was so excited by it, her hands kind of twitched. It was incredibly charming. Goofy but charming. So by the
I just have to
40s,
say, Claire, it's very rare in our world where we're able to give, somebody from Christie's the jitters.
it's definitely one of the highlights of my career. By the time by the time we were in the 1940s, the costume collection was separated out from the art collection, and they rehoused it under the School of Home Economics. And the woman you see here with the students was a woman named Mary Brennaman Carter, and she was the first curator of the costume collection. And she worked tirelessly to raise its profile. And I have documentation, copies of letters that she sent to various museums around the country. How best to clean the lace, how best to catalog things. She really took it very seriously, and we would not have the collection that we have today without her efforts. So I just want to say, wherever you are, Mary Brennaman Carter, thank you. And what is also amazing about Mary Carter is she partnered with the founder of arguably the most prestigious specialty shop in Philadelphia, Nanduskin. And Nanduskin and Mary Brennaman, they essentially campaigned all the fashionable women who had shopped at Nanduskin since the 20s and asked them to donate to the costume collection here at Drexel. So the collection went from a couple of hundred things to about 7,000 objects in a very short span of time. And there's some really spectacular things that came in during the Mary Carter years. In particular, there's one donation from the estate of A.J. Drexel's granddaughter. And she primarily shopped at Clare Sauro. So I won't deny it. This is one of the things that drew me to Drexel. I had heard they had a wonderful collection. I was curious, and I came through on my job interview, and they just happened to have, a calo and a dress form in the corner. And I spotted it and was like, well, that's interesting. And I asked, and they're like, oh, we have some others like that. So anyway, but this is one of my favorites. It's really just gorgeous. It's the teal with the deep blue, and if you look closely, that metallic thread is actually copper and not gold. It's just really extraordinary color. And then this is also from the same estate. This is from about 19, this is spring 1916, and we always call this one the Fairy Princess. It's silk tulle. It's a little tattered at this point, but it's just phenomenal. And it has these glass, like grapes strewn garland across the hips, and these swags that come down the back. Um, her I don't know offhand how many callow pieces we have from her, but we have about 33 documented in the collection, and the majority of them are from Mini Drexelfeld Cassatt's estate.
Just hanging out as they are.
Just hanging
Yeah.
out. Yeah,
Royal
it
Park.
is my
Royal Park,
fantasy.
just right there.
It is my fantasy that we'll get conservation and be able to really do a spectacular callow exhibition, but the numbers on that one is just terrifying. Maybe if we were a different institution, a museum with, deep pockets. We did also get one of our great treasures, a coral encrusted evening gown donated by Princess Grace of Monaco. Princess Grace,
Wow.
when she was Grace Kelly here in Philadelphia, had shopped at Nan Duskin. So Nan, Mrs. Lincoln was really Nan's name. Mrs. Lincoln worked her magic, and this dress came to us in the late 60s. It is really quite spectacular, and it's by far probably the most beloved dress in our collection. Princess dress. It's kind of hard to pass up.
Claire, I have
And
a question.
this is also a very important dress. It's the Charles James Bustle dress from the late 40s. Our example was donated and worn by Babe Paley, who had a connection to Philadelphia as well. And Mrs. Lincoln worked her magic. We have two Charles Jameses worn by Babe Paley. This one is in pretty good shape. The other is the very famous March of Dimes gown with the red velvet bodice and the organza underskirt. And it's the organza underskirt is terrible, but the folks at the Met say that they all look like that, so I don't feel too bad.
On the Princess Grace dress, is that all like those? Is that all beading? I couldn't quite tell in the pictures.
Oh,
That was,
yes, I'm sorry.
what
It
is all of that?
is,
It
what
looks like
is that?
embroidery. Tell me more
Um,
about
it's a lace that is then embroidered and beaded over it. So it's a lace with then raffia embroidery and seed beads. And then additionally, there are individual branches of coral. And the coral is only stitched through on one end, so they tremble. And so when you're moving the dress, when you're dressing it, it makes this delightful kind of tinkling noise. But that's something that, you don't get when you see it on display. It's really only like a little secret if you're wearing it or you're dressing the mannequin.
that. Please tell me you've worn this around the museum just for fun.
I wear this around the house. Actually, I did receive a number of years ago an email from a former home economics alumni and a graduate from home economics. And she told me that when the dress arrived, she was the right size. So they had her wear it for some event at the college. and she said it was the most wonderful moment of her life. It was like very sweet that she sent that to me. And that actually was something that they did quite often in the Mary Carter years. They would have these like luncheons and teas, and the students would wear the clothes. So I do encounter graduates of the home economics program who will tell me, oh, I wore this dress and it was so lovely, and I didn't quite fit, so we pinned it. And like, there are things that make me cringe, but generally they're just so in love with the collection and have such great memories. I just say, oh, that's wonderful. um, the Schiaparelli here, my friend's mother actually wore. There's a picture of her mother wearing it in the
Wow.
60s. Actually, the 50s, but still. Okay.
How many
Um,
Schiaparelli do you have?
I think we have five.
All right, I'm getting on a plane tomorrow, and
We
I'm
are
just
certainly
sure
welcome.
I'm just going to
Um,
come to Philadelphia because I want to see me some Schiaparelli.
you are certainly welcome. I should know how many we have offhand. It might be five. They're in varying states of uh, health, but this one's very sturdy. We have a dress that's trimmed in like a one of those crinkly synthetics that she used in the early 30s. Our pieces are all kind of slinky. We have one with a big zipper. We have some good Schiaparellis. Um, by the time Mary Carter retired, and this was also a time when the field of home economics was falling out of favor, so they switched it into fashion design. And the costume collection was kind of dormant for many years. It was seen as old fashioned and kind of fussy, and what do you do with it? There was a number of things that were sold off. And it wasn't until the mid 90s that you really started to see the design faculty, the fashion design faculty, really starting to champion and take an interest in the collection. So I do have to say, certainly Kathy Martin did a lot of work early on, and Roberta Gruber, who was the head of the design department for many years. They really pushed to say that this is important, and this should be utilized in a better way, and this is something really special. So it's really because of Kathy and Roberta that I showed up at Drexel. I was the first full-time curator. I was the first person that was hired specifically to be a curator of this collection since Mary Carter. In that in-between period, it was just whoever happened to take an interest running the collection. Um, and shortly after I arrived, I discovered we had way more things than they thought that we thought we had. And I just kind of dug in and really devoted myself to figuring out what we had, and how best to take care of it. And within a few years, we received news that we were moving to a new building. So I had the opportunity. Essentially, I came back from maternity leave and started working in 2011, and started working with architects to design our space. And I'm very grateful that the the Philadelphia Museum of Art was very generous with their time, and I came and visited their space. And I had worked at the museum at FIT for quite a while, so I had that collection very clean in my head, very clear in my head. And then I also acquainted myself with PMA. So, it's not as sophisticated as either of those spaces, but I think it's pretty good. And we moved down the street. And shortly after that, we became a staple in the building. So the building itself is architecturally very interesting. And we had a lot of tours to see the new space. And the costume collection became a stop on that tour. And it was just a big promotional push, and it pulled us out of that dormant period that we had been in. And one of those tours was Robert and Penny Fox, who came through and said, what do you need to help this collection along? And so they were very generous, and they wrote a check, and we got renamed. And that is really what propelled us forward. Very shortly after that, another tour came through, and that brought funding for our first large scale exhibition, Immortal Beauty, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And then it's just kind of snowballed from there. So we acquired the James Galanos archive. We got our own gallery. It's been very busy, which is why I haven't been so busy with CSA.
So before you dive in, so when you moved, you're like, oh, we have this giant collection, and now we have this, other space. Were you surprised? Were things like tucked away in cupboards and hither and yon and all over the place? And were people like, oh, and then there's this over there? Like,
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. That was the that was the surprising thing. I was working with the architects and I was designing the space for 7,000 objects. And as we were getting ready to leave the building, people kept reaching out to me and saying like, "Oh, well, do you know about this closet? Do you know about the storage room down in the basement? Do you know about the offsite storage down the street?" So there was just suddenly so many more things that I was not aware of. Um,
I have some stuff in my garage,
yeah, pretty
I've been
much.
waiting for you to come and get them.
Yeah, it was a little chaotic, but we did it. We made it as organized as possible, and we quickly outgrew that space because one, we had things coming out of spaces we didn't know existed, and then two, once we were there and people heard about it, our donation offers quadrupled. Like in the first year, it was pretty crazy. Um, and I had been working all along to really um, get people to understand that this was a really fantastic collection. And it was hard. It was a difficult thing to do because Drexel's primarily, I mean, they're getting better, but for years they were primarily like an engineering school. And you'd meet somebody at a meeting and say, "Oh, well, I run the historic costume collection," and they look at you like lobsters coming out of your ears. Um, it,
In a Chaparelli dress.
exactly, that was a very Schiaparelli moment there. So I had like an image issue, and one of the things that I did to combat that was I tried to make other institutions aware of what we had. Now, some of these loans happened before I arrived, but others were under my time. And so whenever there's an opportunity to share a piece from our collection in another institution, I jumped at it. So the dress you see here on display is a gown that was designed by Gilbert Adrian and worn by Greta Garbo in a film called Inspiration from 1931. And we have the original. Kevin at Fidham did a really great analysis of this dress many, many, many years ago. So we have the legitimate one, and it's been very popular with other institutions. And so I want people to see this, but it also helped me, get some credibility at Drexel. Like, hey, I just lent this dress to the Salvatore Ferragamo Museum, and they were delighted to borrow it, So it started to change the reputation of what we had. It went from like, oh, it's just like the clothes closet to like it's a proper museum, even though we're not technically a museum. So, one of our big acquisitions since then is the James G. Galanos archive. Galanos was one of the most prominent fashion designers in the United States from the 50s through the 90s, and he was born in Philadelphia. So the family, the foundation, felt very strongly that both his collection, his personal archive, should come back to the Philadelphia region, and they really wanted it to be seen by students, to be seen by future designers. They thought that was the legacy that they wanted. So we received over 700 ensembles of his work, and most of these have their original sample hang tags. So we have things like style numbers and seasons and what the price
Wow.
was, which is astonishing. He was very expensive. But it's really a wonderful overview of a designer's creative output over many, many years. We also received literally hundreds of sketches and swatches and photographs. The photographs are really quite amazing. And this is one of my favorite Galanos sketches. He did all of his own sketching, and they're just really, he's got a very confident hand. So even if you're not into, cutting, garments, you can learn a lot from his illustrations.
That's a gorgeous sketch.
So there are some things that I've brought in my time that I really enjoy for like my quirky reasons. So like you're seeing right here a pair of jeans that were worn at Woodstock that are patched and painted and they have mud still on them and a bit of a bandana that a bottle was hung on. They're incredible. And there's a photograph of the original owner wearing them at Woodstock in like the Life magazine commemorative, so they're just, a dream come true for that sort of thing. And the archivist at Levi's is really super excited by these, so we might be lending them to a Levi's exhibition in the next year. We also have a group of fashion items that were purchased as gifts in 1918 and were never given because the woman who purchased them succumbed to the Spanish influenza. So they were just put in an attic for about 100 years and eventually they came to us. So those are really poignant and fascinating and also pristine because they remained in their boxes all that time. So it's there's two celluloid combs and a purse and a corset bag, and they just have cute little notes written on them. And then, of course, we have a group of Romeo Gili garments that were worn by a fashion editor in the late 80s and early 90s. And what I really love about this donation is, personally, I love Romeo Gili, but she also, in her donation record, she indicated like I would wear this blouse with these pants and this vest. Like she basically told us exactly how she styled everything. And additionally, she gave us several boxes full of fashion ephemera. So things like invitations to runway shows and lookbooks and just the sort of things that fashion editors accumulate and don't really save. So it's a wonderful kind of time capsule of 90s fashion there. Our collection has grown organically for the most part. It has been almost entirely through donations. The problem with that is that there are some pretty significant gaps. So I don't have much of a budget to purchase items, but I do specifically seek out contemporary fashion, youthful fashion because our collection definitely skews older and more ladylike. We do love items with Philadelphia connections, and there are definitely underrepresented designers and makers. So we have been going out of our way, to get Willie Ware or Scott Barry or African American designers, specifically the ones that were born in Philadelphia, are very interesting to us and to our students. So we are seeking out those pieces. This is an installation shot from our gallery, and so there's a green Stephen Burrows there with the kind of peekaboo bodice. That was a purchase. I bought that on Etsy. There's a blue Pleats Please Issey Miyake. That was a purchase. And then there's like a shimmery coat by Marnie that I purchased for that textile. It's just really kind of different and not the sort of thing that's going to come in the door.
Right.
So as I mentioned earlier, Immortal Beauty was our first big exhibition. It came out of one of those, come see what we have in our costume collection, and it was a wonderful opportunity just to kind of show off what we had. So of course the Grace Kelly was in there, and of course the Charles James was in there, and I really just put everything into this exhibition because I thought this was my one shot at an exhibition, because we didn't have a space, and my plan was that we were going to focus on digitizing the collection and getting an online database. And this exhibition just changed everything. It was wildly successful. I had a very good review by Laura Jacobs at the Wall Street Journal. I joked that I could just retire at that point, that it was done. I was never going to get any better than that review. But this exhibition really opened Drexel's eyes. It changed the understanding of what we were capable of in this area. So shortly after that, we turned around and we mounted an exhibition at the James Michener Art Museum, and they just said, "We just want you to do a fashion exhibition. We don't care what it is." It's like you have to give me something more than that. So we flipped it. Sorry, if Immortal Beauty is kind of like the fashion's greatest hits, um, they wanted a century of style. Like, okay, a century of style. How do we frame it? I decided that we talked about specifically Philadelphia retailers, makers, and the women in Philadelphia who wore them. So that kind of gave us the narrative framework for that exhibition. And because we were in the James Michener Art Museum, we had a much bigger audience, and they've reported that they had 1,000 people through that gallery on the opening day, and over the duration of the exhibition, it was over 30,000 visitors. Which again,
Wow.
never again will I ever have anything like that. But it was a great experience. They were very very appreciative of the collection. Um, James Galanos, Design Integrity, was a celebration of the recently acquired Galanos archive. So this was just a little peek at what we had. And right around the same time, we launched our own gallery. So we have an 1,100 square foot gallery. It holds more or less 40 to 50 dressed forms or mannequins. It is very modular because, as I said, we have a tiny staff, so we have to just, we can't get too fancy with the installations. But we do rotate these exhibitions every 6 months, because, conservation needs. So currently, our current exhibition is Venus and Diana, Fashioning the Jazz Age. It did open in the fall, but with Omicron, it didn't feel right to really publicize it because things were just locked down. So we have extended this exhibition through May 6th. If you want to come to Philadelphia, please reach out. We would love to have you visit. And things are opening up a little bit, and so it's please come. I really do love this exhibition, and it's very frustrating that very few people are getting to see it. We did create an online version of the exhibition, and this is venusanddiana.com. So if you can't make it, Leon, you're all the way in California, or actually you're in Georgia now, but come, visit it online. Most of the objects on display are photographed and on that website. So we were aware of the COVID limitations, and we did put that together. It's not quite the same experience, but I
Yeah.
would really love it if people would come see it that way. And here are some of the images of how we have them photographed on the website. So uh, you know,
Yes.
everything is there. You can download them. We just really want people to share and enjoy them. And so, as I mentioned, we don't have a database at the moment. That was my
I was going
original
to ask.
goal.
Yeah.
What was that, Leon?
I was going to ask, you've talked a little bit about digitizing, and so I'm gonna, since I've stolen the floor for a moment, I want to ask you about advertising and where you're at on that, since that's how we opened it up.
So yes, we don't have an online database that is publicly accessible. This was the goal before all the exhibitions happened. So if you do exhibitions, well, we don't have a lot of time for the digitization. So we're working on that behind the scenes. Every time we rotate an exhibition, we photograph the objects. So we're amassing data. We're moving towards that. We are in discussion with Drexel IRT about what we can do to create a shared portal between our collection and the art collection, kind of reunite the original museum in a way.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a work in progress, but behind the scenes, we continue to photograph everything. So hopefully when we get the go ahead, we can mobilize quickly. We are, and again, I'm very proud of this. We were invited to participate as a partner in the Google Arts and Culture project. And I believe we are one of only 4 university costume collections around the world that were invited to do so. So it's just a real honor to be on there. So if you're looking to browse our collection, that's actually, the way to do it right now. Little side note, funny story. The invitation letter came, or email rather, from Google came on April 1st. And I just sat there and stared at it for like a couple of days. I'm like, all right, who's pranking me? And I wound up like Googling the woman. I'm like, oh, all right, on LinkedIn, she really does work for Google. But I was like, that, no. Why would Google be contacting us? So it was pretty awesome. We also have a wonderful Instagram account. I can gloat about this because I have nothing to do with it. This is all Monica's doing. So follow us. We're not as scholarly as some Instagram accounts. We're more of a behind the scenes. This is what we're doing in the collection kind of collection. Instagram account. So there's lately, like that was taken just the other day when I was teaching a class on Jeffrey Bean. Lots of behind the scenes images and things like that. And that's it. So I'm happy to take questions or page back on slides if someone wants to see something again or.
All right, so I'm gonna there's some questions in the chat that I'm gonna field for you, and then I have a
Okay.
few myself. So we'll see what happens. The
Okay.
first one is, and which you've already answered, is your entire collection catalog, is it viewable online? And you've shared that with us, so thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Another question is, in the picture of the storage area, there are many hanging garments. Is dust a concern?
Dust is definitely a concern. The hanging storage is compact storage, so it gets closed up every night and there's rubber gaskets on the top. So I wouldn't say it's completely dust free, but things are as controlled as possible.
So apparently, this is from Rita Wood. What happened to the digital collection that was available to the public years ago?
That digital program was actually a research project from Kathy Martin. It was separate from the costume collection. So she still owns, like, that's her intellectual property.
Gotcha, thank you. And then from Chicano, congratulations on all of your successes. Can you talk about your current research projects, exhibitions, or otherwise?
Okay. Well, I am working on a project with Leon and Monica and Arden. Can we talk about that? I don't
We
think we
can
can.
talk about that. I've talked about digitization here in this format a couple of times. So so go ahead and you share some. And
Okay, we are trying to figure out where the disconnect is between the users of historic costume databases and the metadata. Like, can people actually find what they're looking for, and why not? It's a great research question, not my question, but I'm really happy to be a part of the team.
it really helps us try and sort out like how we digitize, what we digitize, and what the metadata is that we're using. So I think maybe that's where we should stop at the moment, and just leave it there as a as a cliffhanger
Yes,
for the
more to
audience
come.
later. More, but
More, more to come.
we're deep in the analysis of some of these things, and some of the people who are in the audience right now have participated in this experiment, and we thank you all, and so we're super excited about it. So I have a question for you.
Yes.
Um, you mentioned that the color stuff are your favorite things. Are they really your favorite things, or what's really your favorite thing? If you could take one thing out of the collection and be like, "This is mine,"
The teal velvet calo that we're looking at the detail of, I think that's
it's
probably
gorgeous.
the one. I don't know, maybe the Greta Garbo dress. I think it changes a lot.
I know. How can't it be? How can't it? Uh, no, like these are just such beautiful things. I mean, when you're working with them and you see them and you forget about things, and then you open that box and you're like, well, hello, old friend. Where have you been?
Where have you been? I forgot all about you. Yes,
You're back
entirely.
suddenly. Exactly. Um, Obviously the Renaissance textiles must be the oldest things in the collection.
Yes. Yes, indeed. They were I one of these days I would love to get a Renaissance textile scholar come through, and because I mean I know some, but I'm not an expert. I really want an expert to come through and take a look at them and just, you know, tell me more and verify what I think I'm looking at.
Well, you have
Yes,
such
but
a broad range of things in the collection. I mean, so my next question for you is, with a collection of this size, and you're like, oh, it's only 20,000 pieces.
they're
Um, how, um, so as you came into working there, what was your primary research background? I mean, where was your love in terms of designers or textiles or dress? And how have you had to really expand that to address this really broad collection, this large collection that you have?
Oh, sure. Yes, I had been at the museum at FIT, which is also a very broad collection.
Yeah.
Um, but because it was so broad, I was really able to zero in on, like, my passion is really the 1930s. It was for many, many
Yeah.
years. Drexel's 30s collection is not that great. I mean, despite the fact that we have, you know, two amazing Adrians from MGM. Like, our 30s are nowhere near as good as what the FIT 30s are, let's say. But you know, I came here. I liked the teens, but I really went bonkers for the teens that we had, all because of what we had from mini Drexel Velcasat. Like, those pieces from that estate are just phenomenal. So I went deep into the teens for a while, because of that.
Isn't it interesting how we have opportunities in our life, like the things that we love, ebb and flow and change, and when we join an institution or a university or whatever it is where we're at, opportunities come up and it's like, oh my God, that's amazing. I need to know more about that.
Oh yeah, I'm always learning, you know, and I think that's a big part of it. Is it keeps me going. It's just so exciting. And if I'm too focused on a project for too long, like, I need to go find something completely different to obsess over for a little bit, which is, you know, good for my personality, you know. You know, it's a big, you know, it's a big messy collection, and I like
Yeah.
finding order and making sense out of it.
We have a few more questions from the audience. One
Yeah.
from Tracy. Are there any hand fans in the collection? If so, how many?
Oh, oops, sorry. I have no idea how many we have. We definitely have a good number of hand fans. Somebody at some point decided to take them all out of their original boxes, and they got damaged. So the fans are in sad shape because somebody had some organizational idea that was not a good one. So I don't have a good answer on that. I can tell you about my favorite fan, though. It's from the early 20th century, teens, we think. It's mother of pearl sticks and lace, which, at first glance, it's kind of unremarkable. But then when you open it up and you look at the lace, there's a into the lace, there's a shield worked in. And in the shield, it says facta non verba, which translates to deeds, not words, which is a suffragist slogan. So this was a very provocative, but yet subtly provocative fan. And I love to think about who was carrying this fan at some elite social function. But I don't know how many fans we have. I'm sorry.
So thank you. Another one are, do you have any fan favorites in the collection that are particularly popular with the students who visit the collection for class?
Oh, that's a really good question. It's changed. It's definitely changed. I'm trying to think specific objects. Um, they really like the 90s right now. So all the things that I'm kind of like meh about because I lived through them, they're really excited. So um, like anything stretchy mesh or I don't know.
You're like our club
Um,
for older people. We don't need to
yeah,
babysit.
they want like 90s clothes.
Um, Another question is, or a statement is from Elizabeth. I am a trustee volunteer at a local historic house museum who has spent a lot of time in our costume collection. In a perverse way, it's encouraging to me to know that even a real collection has unexplored boxes of stuff and garments that are not in perfect condition.
Oh,
Respond.
absolutely yes.
Every collection has that, every collection. And that's
Yes.
part of the wonderful, part of the reason. So, Elizabeth, thank you for asking that. Part of the reason I began hosting this webinar over a year ago is because those are my favorite museums. I love the historic houses where it's like, I don't know what's in this box. Let's open it up and see. And or
We're
like
still doing that.
or there's really unusual collections that are hidden away and they're like, we have some glass cases of stuff. Do you want to hold it? Like, yes, yes, I do. Thank you. Um, so those are awesome. And you're doing great work. And these collections are everywhere and that we are treasuring them and highlighting them is really part of this. And it takes time. So, and then a next question is, what do you have in terms of men's garments? Are there any men's garments?
Oh, we have some menswear. It's definitely not a strength, because men tend to wear their clothes out. We do have some menswear, but it's mostly pieces here and there. As a matter of fact, our oldest garment is a men's piece. It's a man's waistcoat from the 1740s. And that has a Philadelphia provenance. It was worn by a Captain Brown, and he was, I can't remember what his title was, but he was somebody in the Revolution, and we know exactly where he was buried. And, it all checks out historically. So it's a pretty cool piece, but generally we don't have a lot of menswear. We have bits and pieces. We have some really cool 70s polyester shirts and loud prints. We just received a full rave outfit from the 90s. So Junko jeans and like a tight tech t-shirt. So the students are going to love that. But for the
Does,
most part we don't.
underneath does,
Cl-
there have to be
cl-
does.
yeah. For- we just don't have menswear.
A couple of questions more as we're hitting the top of the hour. One from Kelly: do you have any advice for creating a donations policy? I don't want to sound too harsh and discourage people from donating items, but we are in the habit of getting random boxes left on our doorstep at our very tiny local museum. Also,
Oh,
thank you so much. This was wonderful, very inspiring.
you're very welcome. I have to say that that is the trickiest thing of all. We try, um, we actually have it set up. We try to filter all donations through a general email. And because we're at a university, like no one can just drop something off at our door, which is good. Um, but we try to set up like a buffer, and at a third person. So Michael, who has no say in any of the donations, we kind of make him be the go-between with the donors. But he's very good, he's very kind, and he's very, because he's not the person making the decision, it softens it when he tells them, no, we can't take that. It's very lovely, but it's much too much like other things we have. Um, but
Can I
occasionally,
jump in
yeah,
on that?
you do
Yeah.
sometimes get things just sent to you. I'm
There was a
sorry.
great panel. I'm going to add to that, Claire. There was a great panel at CSA a couple of years ago at the symposium on developing a clear mission statement and a
Hmm.
collective statement. And once you have developed what that is, however you word it and phrase it, that is what helps to guide the collection and to guide the donations and accepting of them. And within those things, there are even ways in which collections can talk about disposal of objects that may no longer serve the mission of the collection. So, Kelly, if you want, I'm sure you can either post this in a member circle or email CSA, and we can send you some more information on that. And now I'm going to take the last question because I'm super interested. Since you were talking about the 90s,
Hmm.
have any Thierry Mugler?
Oh, three. Well, no, four. We have three suits, no gowns, but like one is a brocade suit and it's gorgeous. And I think three suits and two pairs of shoes, I think.
Okay, you might be seducing even more Claire. Like, seriously, Schiaparelli and Mugler all in one trip. Like, I don't know what I'm gonna do here. Like, really.
You are very welcome to come. Yeah, I mean, I would like to be more active, and but anyway, I won't invite everybody. Certainly. I mean, but yes, if you are coming to town, let me know. We'll try to host you. I mean, we might not be able to pull everything out, but certainly, reach out
And
if you have a research
do you allow
project.
scholars? I was gonna say, do you allow researchers and scholars to come?
Um, well, not lately, but yes, we allow scholars and researchers from other institutions to come. We love it. We love it when our pieces wind up in someone's publications. Like we're really happy about it. So, um, Michael loves to take the photographs, so like we will try to. Um, won't go as far as say collaborate, but like we really want to share our collection.
Awesome. Claire, thank you so much. This has been fabulous. I've heard about the Drexel collection for a long time and had one particular idea in my mind about what the Drexel collection was because I've never been. And this has completely illuminated it for me. And I'm super excited to kind of visit you in Philadelphia and make you drag out all of those things that I want to see. And I'm really excited about it. So I'd like to thank everyone tonight for coming and joining us, and have a great night, everyone. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.